When was the last time you were genuinely moved by a statistic? Numbers of people suffering, degrees of temperature change, or acres of rainforest cut down. Saying 1.2 billion people lack access to electricity is most definitely informative and frankly overwhelming, but numbers have a habit of fading over time. Statistics may inform us, but they rarely transform us. But when you hear stories of real people with names, with lived experiences and real emotions, you feel something at a much deeper level that stays with you for much longer. Our brains are wired for stories. Neuroscience shows us that when we hear a story, our brains release oxytocin, the chemical that builds empathy and trust. And storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool for making connections, changing hearts and minds, and inspiring people to take action. An example that clearly illustrates this dichotomy between using statistics and technical jargon versus using storytelling is when we talk about climate change. For the average person in the street, the field of climate change can seem like a science with its own language, with terms like mitigation, adaptation, greenhouse gas emissions, and biodiversity loss. It's a tough ask to imagine the everyday lay person can even make sense of this plethora of terms and concepts. But if we really want people to understand the gravity of the climate crisis, it makes a difference to hear about real stories, like that of Ioane Teitiota, a native of Kiribati, a tiny island country in the North Pacific made up of coral atoll islands barely above sea level that are unfortunately slowly sinking. Ioane lives with his wife and 3 children in a small house next to the seashore where his community experiences what's known as king tides. That is, very high tides that increasingly flood Ioane's land, making it impossible to source fresh water from his well, and he has to rely on limited rainwater for his family to drink. Ioane lives in genuine fear of these king tides and their impact. His life is increasingly difficult, and he honestly believes his family's lives are in danger. See, that isn't just discussing the phenomena of climate change. It's talking about real people's lives that are directly threatened, moving stories of a real existential crisis. It confronts us with looking into the eyes of the issue, to feel empathy and evoke compassion in our hearts. But it speaks to the power of storytelling. Stories build emotional bridges. They allow us to step into someone else's shoes, even if we've never lived their life. They enable a connection and remind us what it is to be human. In other words, they humanize issues, and that can disarm resistance. What I mean by that is that you can always argue with a statistic, contest how it's presented, that it only represents one way of looking at an issue, but it's harder to argue with an actual lived experience of a real person. And most importantly, when you feel connected to a story, you feel more compelled to do something about it, like actually take action to support a worthy cause in whatever way you choose, whether it's by donating money, volunteering, taking to the streets to protest, or even changing your own personal behavior patterns. We can all remember a story that had a profound impact on us. The fact is, stories change people, and they have the potential to change the world. Not because they present facts, but because they hold up a mirror to our own humanity. And absolutely everyone has a story that someone somewhere needs to hear. Allow me to share 2 personal experiences that I've had in recent months that illustrated the power of storytelling to me. This summer, I was lucky enough to be one of a group of trainers delivering a 1-week youth workshop in human rights advocacy. Now, this wasn't just an ordinary group of young people. They were hand-selected youth activists from around the world who work on the front line of a range of issues, including climate change, mental health, gender, violence, and several others. They were sharp, intellectually curious, articulate, passionate, and frankly, an inspiring group of young changemakers. Anyway, in one of their workshops on the second day, they were asked to give a 1-minute pitch of themselves to an imaginary high-ranking official in a short elevator ride. They weren't given much time to prepare before they had to stand up and give their 1-minute pitch to me, as I'd been volunteered by the trainer to be said official. Now, all of these participants knew their stuff, back to front. They could recite facts and talk eloquently about their work and the challenges faced in their context. All well and good. But on day 3, they had another workshop, led by a journalist and storyteller, someone not from the non-profit social sector. He was a highly skilled orator, but not someone who spoke the technical language of youth advocacy. He challenged them once again to give their 1-minute elevator pitches, but this time to tell a story, include personal experience, talk to the emotions felt in their work. This required them to essentially be a little vulnerable and peel back a protective layer. And this actually proved to be a lot harder for the participants. It pushed them outside of their comfort zones because the trainer wasn't looking for stats and policies and legal frameworks. He wanted their real human stories with real emotions and real lived experiences to connect with, that anyone from any walk of life could resonate with, be emotionally affected by, and most importantly, remember. It reminds me of one of my favorite Maya Angelou quotes that goes, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And that might seem a bit depressing, thinking of people forgetting what you said and did in life, but we can all relate to having someone in our lives who made us feel valued and listened to. For example, a school teacher who made learning fun and made you feel worthy in some way. Their memory will last a lifetime, but it's highly likely you've forgotten a lot of what they actually taught you. The other personal experience of mine happened on a long road trip with my family during the summer holidays. Instead of everyone plugging into their devices and locking into social media or music, we played a card game called We're Not Really Strangers, the Self-Love Edition. If you're not familiar with this card game, it was launched in 2018, gained fame on TikTok, and involves taking turns to read out cards in 3 categories for each person in the group. The original version was designed to foster connection between 2 people, with each category going into more depth and requiring more personal detail to be shared. The Self-Love Edition has 3 categories divided into past, present, and future, and is presented as loving all versions of yourself, even the ones you may not recognize anymore, and the ones you haven't met yet, and comes with a warning that healing may arise. Sample questions include things like, what do you want to stop apologizing for? And when was the last time you surprised yourself? Now, that line of questioning might sound a little cheesy to the cynics out there, but I honestly found it really enlightening, often emotional, and ultimately hugely enjoyable. It was genuinely several hours of quality family time that I was deeply grateful for. Interestingly, while everyone was mostly talking about things others already knew about in terms of events that happened in their life, the thing that stood out for me was that each person was being put on the spot to process a memory, inner thought, hope, or desire, and articulate themselves from their own unique personal perspective, i.e., tell their story. It required everyone to be a little vulnerable and bare their soul in a way, but we were all in a safe, supportive space. And when someone perhaps found difficulty in answering, for example, talking about their inner strengths, others would help them out and point out the person's qualities from their own perspectives, which served as a kind of heartwarming source of validation. But it goes to show that we all have a story worth telling. We just might not have practiced saying it out loud, assuming that people already knew, or maybe that nobody will be interested. And don't get me wrong, storytelling is an art and it takes practice and we can always learn and improve, but we've all had gifted storytellers in our lives. People who had us hanging on every word, an emotional thread wrapped up in the drama and nail-bitingly anticipating the big ending. And of course, you do have to choose wisely who you tell your own personal story to, whether that's a friend, family member, or even therapist. But it's one of life's greatest gifts to have someone in your life to tell your story to, and if you're lucky enough, create your story with. So, what's your story? What's something in your life that has shaped who you are? Because I have no doubt your story has the power to make a change in the world. Whether it's touching one heart or 1 million, everyone should consider their story as worth sharing. Or you could share it right here in the comments. For now, I'd like to thank you for watching this episode. Feel free to share it with anyone it may resonate with. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again soon.